Good morning again, everybody. I hope your morning is going well. Again, my name is Tyler, and I'm going to be giving the message for today. Okay, so we have a starting picture here to think about. It's kind of a question, and then I'll give my answer. It's a very exposing answer. But okay, so are you a hearer or are you a doer? In your life, are you a hearer or are you a doer? Okay, and so I'll give some examples of the difference between a hearer and a doer. A hearer is somebody who maybe hears a good idea and they listen really intently to it. So maybe one of my friends comes to me and they're like, they have a really good idea. They tell me like plans to build some really cool technology that could make a lot of money, and I think, oh, that's a good idea. Yep, that's cool. And then I don't do anything about it. I nod my head in agreement. I think, yep, that's a really good idea. So I hear it, but then a doer would be somebody who hears that and then they think, oh, that is a really good idea. Now I'm gonna put that plan into action. I'm gonna, make a lot of money. Okay, I'll give you a real life example though. For me, Tyler, in my childhood, this is the real life example because I fit much more into the hearer category than the doer category. I like to hear the good idea, think about the good idea for a really long time, but it takes me a long time to actually do the good idea. So, the classic example is, cleaning your room. So for me, when I was at home, I was homeschooled, so I was at home, and I'd hear some instructions from my parents. Tyler, you need to clean your room. Oh yeah, that's a good idea. I hear it. I got that. I heard that. But did the room get cleaned? I didn't do it. Oh, no. And then I hear it again. Oh, Tyler, you need to clean your room. Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, I'll do that. Oh, no, the room's not clean because I was being a hearer. I was hearing, the thing that I needed to do. I was actually paying attention to it. I'm like, okay, that is what I need to do. And I would think about it, and I'd think, this is what I need to do. But I wouldn't actually do it. And so that's my, example of me in my life. So the question is, are you a hearer or are you a doer? When you hear something that you need to do, if there's something in your life that you need to do you just hear it and think about it, or do you actually do it? And we're going to be talking about somebody today, Joseph. He was not somebody who said very much. He's not somebody who... he certainly probably thought about things, and he probably had worries and fears, but he was somebody who did what God asked him to do immediately, and we're gonna find out about that. But we're gonna read first a verse from the book of James, and it's verses 22 to 25, chapter 1. Okay, so, but be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he's like a man who looks intently at his natural face in a mirror. For he looks at himself and goes away and at once forgets what he was like. But the one who looks into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and perseveres, being no hearer who forgets, but a doer who acts, he will be blessed in his doing. Okay, so James is telling us to be doers of the word and not hearers only. So when we hear what God is calling us to do, or we hear something in the Bible, or we read something in the Bible that God calls us to do, James is saying here, or maybe we know God is calling us to do something. James is saying here, don't just hear it, but do it as well. And he gives this example, and we have a picture of somebody looking into a mirror here, of somebody who looks really intently at themselves in a mirror. And it's kind of like, you're looking at yourself in the mirror and you think, okay, this is who I am. I can see myself. This is who I am. And then as soon as you look away from the mirror, you completely forget who you are. And it's kind of like the way it can be with the Bible and hearing God's word. Like sometimes we look intently at it and we listen and we think, okay, because the word of God, ultimately the word of God is what, tells us who we are. It tells us what we're supposed to do. And so when we look closely at it, we get a picture of who we are. But oftentimes in my life, I'll listen to a sermon, or I'll be reading a really good thing in my Bible, and I'll look at it intently, and I'll think, okay, this is who I am. And then I'll go away from it, and I will forget. I won't remember anymore, or I won't do what it is that I was reading that I'm actually called to do. And so James is telling us here that it's extremely important to not just be a hearer, but to actually be a doer as well. So at the end he says there, but the one who looks into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and perseveres, be no hearer who forgets, but a doer who acts, he will be blessed in his doing. Okay, so that's our first point for today, is be doers of the word, not hearers only. Okay, so we're going to talk about Joseph now, because Joseph is not usually focused on very often in the Christmas story, likely because there's not really too much about him. He doesn't really say anything, or if he does, we don't really hear what it is. But there's a couple things that we can take from Joseph's life that are very interesting. Joseph didn't really have a very spectacular story in terms of New Testament characters. The kinds of things that he did were not really very exciting. The things that he had faith to do. Some people you have, like in the New Testament, they experience all kinds of crazy miracles that Jesus did, right? And maybe their faith story, they end up walking on water, or they get to see, Lazarus rise from the dead. Joseph didn't have anything really glamorous. He didn't actually really get to see Jesus do any miracles. He had passed away before Jesus even had his ministry. He just had to steadily live his life and raise his family and do what God had called him to do faithfully. So, but the interesting thing about Joseph is that when God came to him and told him to do something, he did it immediately. That's what we learn about Joseph. And there's 3 examples of this in his life that we're going to look at today. And the first one is with him and Mary, and marrying Mary. That's a tongue twister there. But so he's a newly engaged man, and he gets the news that Mary is pregnant. And so he has these plans in his life to marry this person that he loves. He's got everything set up, and he finds out she's pregnant, and he doesn't know yet that this is part of God's plan, and so he's probably crushed. He's absolutely crushed. His plan in life has just completely gone sideways. He was going to marry this person, and now he obviously from his perspective at this point, he's been cheated on, and he doesn't know what to do. So he decides still, he's a guy who wants to follow God, and he wants to do what's right, and he still loves Mary, and so he wants to divorce her quietly and not bring any kind of shame to her. And so let's read the story, and then we'll see what he does. Okay, so this is Matthew chapter 1, verses 18 onwards. So, now the birth of Jesus Christ took place in this way. When his mother Mary had been betrothed to Joseph, before they came together, she was found to be with child from the Holy Spirit. And her husband Joseph, being a just man and unwilling to put her to shame, resolved to divorce her quietly. But as he considered these things, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, do not fear to take Mary as your wife, for that which is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us. When Joseph woke from sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. He took his wife, but knew her not until she had given birth to a son, and he called his name Jesus. Okay, so the first thing that we see happen is that in Joseph's life, when a challenging situation comes into his life that's totally unexpected, right? He's going along, and nothing crazy in the history of Israel is happening right now. So he doesn't really know that God is going to be doing this huge plan. He's not expecting this, right? He's just living his life. He's decided he's going to marry somebody. He wants to raise a family, and his whole plan goes sideways. And so he thinks, okay, I've got to quietly divorce Mary now. But he still seeks to do the best thing. Joseph's trying to do the right thing, right? He's not gonna be rude or mean to Mary. He is gonna try and make this the best for both of them, right? But his human love, in a sense, has failed at this point. He doesn't really want to marry Mary yet. But then the angel shows up, and the angel shows up and tells him to do two things: to marry Mary, to continue with the marriage, and to name the baby Jesus. And what we get of Joseph's response is this: when Joseph woke from sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. He took his wife, but knew her not until she had given birth to a son, and he called his name Jesus. That's the response we get of Joseph. We don't hear any exclamation or any questions from him. We just see that he did immediately what God had called him to do. And so one thing we can learn from him is to let go of your own plan and trust God's plan instead. Because Joseph he kind of had two plans, and both of them ended up getting changed. He first was planning to get married, and then that plan kind of got ruined. So he said, "I'm not going to get married now. I'm going to break up with her." And then God enters the picture and tells him, "No, we have a new plan." And astonishingly, he just says yes. He gets up and he marries her, and then he cares for her. He starts to raise a family. He takes her to Bethlehem. He enters into this plan that God has for him to care and love for this family that God has called him to do. And he just does it. Even though, maybe it wasn't his idea or his plan in the first place. Okay, let's move on to the second example of this. It's kind of fast forwarding in time. Jesus has been born, and he's about 2 years old. They've been living possibly in Bethlehem, maybe in a different nearby town. And Joseph gets some surprising news from an angel again in a dream. So this is what happens. So this is in verse 13 onwards. Okay, so now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Rise, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you. For Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." And he rose and took the child and his mother by night and departed to Egypt, and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet, "Out of Egypt I called my son." Okay, so again, in this situation, Joseph is kind of settled down now. He's caring and protecting for his family. He's maybe got a little bit of stability, and he gets a dream in the middle of the night, or sometime in the middle of the night, and the angel says, "Rise and take Jesus and Mary and run to Egypt." You got to leave the country and all the people you ever knew. You got to go to a country that you don't know the language there. You don't really have any security. There's so many things Joseph could have been worried about and think, okay, is this a good financial decision? Should we go right now, or maybe we should save up for 3 months? Are we even going to be able to get into Egypt? Like, are they going to let us in? Like, the Israelites don't have the greatest history with Egypt. why Egypt? Why Egypt? Why not somewhere else that's maybe like a little bit closer or a little bit safer? Like, why can't we just lay low here? What do we do with the house that we're in right now? Do we sell it? How much of our supplies do we do? What's going to happen on the way? Do we need to find a group to buddy up with while we travel down to Egypt? Like, there's so many questions Joseph could have had, and he could have thought, okay, we got to figure all this stuff out first. This is a remarkable faith, actually, that Joseph has. There's not very many people in the Bible who have this kind of faith. This is what we hear of him. He says, "Rise, take the child and his mother to flee to Egypt and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." And he rose and took the child and his mother by night and departed to Egypt. So Joseph is the kind of person, he hears this. You can imagine this situation. He hears this dream. He gets up, he starts packing. He maybe wakes up marrying the baby. And he just starts going to Egypt. That night he starts going to Egypt and obeying what God has called him to do. And the reason is because Joseph trusts that God's plan is the right plan. He trusts that all those other details that he doesn't have figured out, because Joseph doesn't really get to know a lot of the big picture stuff. He gets just very short, succinct things. So he trusts that God's plan is right, and he just does it. He goes and he says, okay, God's going to be with me. If God is calling me to do this, I'm going to go and do it because he trusts in God. And all of those things that could go wrong, sure, maybe they could go wrong, but he knows that God is with him, right? Okay, so Joseph does what God asks him to do. And I think, okay, here's the thing. Sometimes in life, we expect the thing that God is calling us to do to be like a big, glamorous event, right? Like, we want like the cool story where like Peter gets to walk on water. We want something like that. Or like we want to witness the feeding of the 5,000. And we want these really cool things. Like Joseph's big moment that God calls him to is to like run in the middle of the night to like a foreign country where his whole life is kind of upturned. And it's to steadily continue to like do his best to care and love and protect Mary and baby Jesus. And to be a good father, right? So sometimes we think that we have this, the thing that God is going to call us to do is this massive thing, but it might be that he's calling you to really love and be obedient to what God has called you to do in your life with the relationships that you already have. It could be raising your family well. It could be just listening to him when he calls you to do something that maybe you don't really feel like doing or you're afraid to do. Joseph maybe at the beginning was afraid to get married, right? And to get married to Mary in this situation. Because the angel actually addresses that. He says, don't be afraid. Like, you can go and do this. Okay, so Joseph does what God asks him to do. Even though it's kind of weird and confusing, but he trusted God. He loved him. He loved his family. And this is one of our points. It's not going to be on the slide, but love God and others by doing what God asks. That's what Joseph does here. He loves God, and he loves baby Jesus, and he loves Mary by being obedient to what God is asking him to do. So when God asks you to do something, and maybe you're not getting a dream with an angel and like a big revelation, right? But there's lots of things on a daily basis that God asks us to do, and a lot of those things are found just in reading the Bible. And so love God and others by doing what God asks. Okay, so again, Joseph trusts God's plan to a very significant degree, and he always follows it faithfully. And we're going to do one more example. This is after they were in Egypt for a while, and Herod finally dies. Okay, so he says this, "But when Herod died, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, 'Rise, take the child and his mother and go to the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead.' And he rose and took the child and his mother and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judah in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And being warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee. And he went and lived in a city called Nazareth, so that what was spoken by the prophets might be fulfilled, that he would be called a Nazarene." So one more time, Joseph is called now to move out of Egypt and go back, and his response is to do what God is calling him to do. That's always what Joseph's response is just to immediately do what God is asking him to do, and do it to completion as well. He goes the whole way, and this is a really, really remarkable thing. And the truth is that for Joseph, maybe it wasn't really necessarily a glamorous or exciting adventure, but actually what's really amazing is the things that Joseph is being participating in are actually things that are bringing prophecies true. There's all these things that there's reason that they needed to flee to Egypt, and there's a reason that they needed to come back. In all three of these situations, they actually end up fulfilling prophecy that had been foretold a long time ago, and Joseph gets to be a part of that. And I'm not sure if he knows that's the reason, or if he knows that these prophecies are being fulfilled, but he certainly trusts that whatever it is, God is doing something big and something incredible, even though it's not that exciting for him. It's not showy. He's not going to get really much credit out of it at the end. He's just raising his family, and he's moving to a different place, and he's packing up his bags, and he's continuing to just do what God calls him to do. Okay, so we're going to shift now a little bit, and I just sort of close off the Joseph section and then talk about Jesus to end. But so Joseph had a lot of faith. He probably had a lot of questions about why he was doing the things he was doing, and how it was all going to work out. You know, he had some plans crushed for him. You know, no honeymoon, no joyous wedding. He enters into this relationship that from the beginning there's going to be all this public shame around it. He's going into all these situations, these bad financial situations, and these situations where he's doesn't have any stability, and they're going through the wilderness to different places, and they're in dangerous situations. They're going to a different country where they don't know what's going to happen. They have a king trying to, there's a king trying to kill his son, baby Jesus. And there's just all this stuff that is crazy for Joseph, but he trusts God and does what he says. That's the key. So in our lives, when we have all these questions about things, I think sometimes, for me at least, I can think a lot about stuff and I can worry a lot about stuff. But sometimes I think we just need to do what God is calling us to do. And you can even ask questions while you're doing it, but just actually go and take the step. And trust that whatever it is that God's calling you to do, he knows, all those details. He knows that it's going to be risky to go to Egypt, but he has a plan for how that's going to work out. And so in our lives, those situations where we have those questions, he knows the details of those things. He might not reveal them all to us, but we can take the step and do what he actually calls us to do. Okay, so we're going to talk about Jesus now, because today's Advent theme is love, and it's what Christmas is all about. And I have this image that I'm going to bring up here of a snow globe. So let's see if we can get a snow globe up here. Okay, sometimes in life, okay, here's a picture of a snow globe. Who likes snow globes? We got some people. Okay, a snow globe to me, I've had this image of a snow globe in my head for about a month. As this sort of, it's sort of like a picture perfect. It's like a picture perfect life, in a sense. It's like this cozy, warm. Like here, you can't. It's a little bit hard to see in this picture, but there's a cozy, warm house in there. It's snowing, probably Christmas morning. It's always Christmas morning inside of a snow globe, right? It's always Christmas morning, and it's snowing, and there's a warm fire on, and it's just this contained life that's just, in a sense, it's like perfect. It's like perfect little life. This is, in a sense, what life was like at the beginning when God created it. It was like a perfect snow globe, right? And we were with God, and He was with us, and everything was the way that it was supposed to be. And sometimes, like for Joseph, he maybe has. Sometimes we have our ideas of in life, like what are our snow globes? Like what's our picture perfect plan about the way our life is going to go? And Joseph has his snow globe. His snow globe gets shattered on the floor, right? His picture perfect idea of the way things are going to go gets totally broken. And that's what happened. That's actually, it happens in each of our lives individually, but this is what happened with humanity on a whole. We have this in the Garden of Eden when God creates the earth and Adam and Eve. There's this picture perfect life that exists. Things are perfect. And then because of our sin, because of our brokenness, that snow globe, it gets totally shattered. And so we can get the next picture there of all the broken glass. So this is unfortunately the more realistic picture of the world that we live in. We don't really live in a world where there's, that nice, happy, always Christmas morning snow globe, but we live in a world where there's brokenness all around us all the time. And it kind of like influences everything. And so there's this broken world that kind of just doesn't look like it can be repaired at all. And that is the picture that Jesus enters into. God's plan for the world and his plan for what he's going to do about it is he decides not just to do something about it from afar or leave us on our own to figure it out, but his plan is actually to enter into the broken world and be with us. That's his goal. So Jesus, this is a remarkable thing. Jesus being born is one of the most remarkable things in all of history. God coming into the world to be with us as a human, to walk beside us, to see us, to talk with us. And he walked with the disciples, and he lived life with them, and he went through the broken stuff with them. And he does all of this because he loves us. And he wants to show us that even though there's all these broken things in your life, and there's tons of them, and there's gonna be broken things the whole way through, he wants to show us that he's going to be with us in those things. So, some of them are going to be really hard, and some of them aren't even going to be maybe solved in our lifetime. Some of them aren't going to be fully fixed, but he's going to be there right beside you through all of those situations. And that's really what is so exciting about Jesus being born. And this verse that we have at the beginning of Matthew, where it is actually one of Jesus's names. Emmanuel. He says, "Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel," which means God with us. I had this really strong memory in my mind that sticks out to me from a couple of years ago. I went to school for a year away, and I hadn't been to the church I grew up in, which is South Delta Baptist Church. I hadn't been there in a while. And I came back for Christmas Eve, and we were having a candlelight service, right? I don't know if any of you have been to a candlelight service, but they're really awesome. So we had all of our candles up, and I remember I had like 3 or 4 months after I got back from school. I was fairly down and out. I had sort of crashed and burned after I got back from school, and I was feeling pretty hopeless in a lot of ways. And I remember walking in, and I thought, something here is totally different. Something here is totally different than anything else in my life that I've experienced. And it's not just the people. There's someone here that's different. And I just remember walking in that night and feeling the presence of God and recognizing that the reason that we were all here, the reason that we were all celebrating, the reason we all had candles and we were singing joyous songs and all these things, it's not for no reason. It's because God is actually with us, and we're celebrating that, and we're shouting it out, and we're telling people, and we're lighting candles to point towards that, right? And we have songs that we've been singing today to sing about the same thing, that God actually came into our lives, and He's very, very, very close to us. And it's different than anything else in life. Because there's all these things that I look at in my life that are broken, and they're all flawed in some way. They all don't work out quite just right. But then when I look at Jesus, it's perfect. He's perfect. And He's whole, and He's loving, and He's caring. And it's like everything in God's world makes it works. It works the way it's supposed to. And so the encouragement this Christmas season is to look at Jesus and to go and see Him and to talk to Him and get to know Him and spend time with Him, and to also share Him with other people. He came into this broken life with us, and He does have a plan, and His plan in the future is to bring all of us together with Him. In person, we'll get to see Him face to face. And we have a one final picture there of a snow globe that's sort of been repaired, if we could get that picture up there. So His plan is that He is going to restore everything again to that picture-perfect life. He is going to make it all right in the end. In the meantime, when we're going through all the hard things in our life, remember that God is with you. That is the key thing to take away. God is with us. Okay, I'm going to pray now, and we'll have the worship team come back up.